Feedback from my iPad. Okay. That's as low as it'll go. I'm muted here. Oh, let me go. Are we good? No. Good morning, and I appreciate your patience as we work out the technology in this room. Because we had to pull those microphones, if you are going to testify this morning, we're going to ask you to come to the end seat at this table. And then you'll need to turn the red switch up to on so that you'll be able to testify. And with that, I will call the Legislative Task Force for this Tuesday, October 29th, 2024 to order. This is the Legislative Task Force on Aging. We do have a quorum present. We do have a quorum present for the Legislative Task Force on Aging today, Tuesday, October 29th, 2024. There are members who are online and there are members who are in the room. And with that, our first item of business is to adopt the previous meetings from October 9th. Is there any discussion to the meeting minutes in our packets? Are there any members online? Seeing no comments, I will move adoption of the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Hearing none, seeing none, the minutes for October 9th, 2024 are adopted. The next item that we will have on our agenda is an update on the implementation of Aging Our Way from the state of Pennsylvania with their Department of Aging. Are you online?
I am. Good morning.
Good morning. When you are ready, I will, one moment, please. We can't see you on our screens yet.
Perfect.
Oh, there you are. Welcome. We're very appreciative of your being here with us, and we've just lost you again. One moment. Oh, I'm sorry. It's on speaker view. So once you start, it will come up. So
Sounds good.
when you're ready, just state your name for the record and begin your testimony, please.
All right. Well, my name is Gabrielle Szymanski, and thank you so much for being here, for having me today. I am the special advisor to the secretary here at the Department of Aging in Pennsylvania. So very excited to be able to present to you and to hear feedback from all of you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can I just get a thumbs up or verbal if you can see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, great.
One moment, we're going to ask for the volume to be turned up on our end. If you'll please proceed.
So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the background in case there were any questions from the previous presentation, and then going over kind of next steps, where the Department of Aging is currently and where we hope to be by our next budget cycle. If there are any questions, I will be happy to take those. Any comments, any recommendations or feedback, always happy to hear those. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the background again. As you know, nationally, there's a growing trend of older adults, the older adult population growing. In Pennsylvania, this is especially true. We are the fifth oldest older adult population by total number, with almost 3.5 million older adults over the age of 60. And this is expected to grow to almost 33% of our population by 2030. So this is a pretty rapid increase over the next, 2030 is approaching very, very quickly. So this is a little bit again about the background of Aging Our Way PA by the numbers. So again,
excuse me, Gabby, can I ask you to just turn up your volume just a little bit? Or if you can be closer to your microphone, that would be awesome. We're at maximum volume for us here in this room.
Sure. My volume is all the way up, but I can speak a little bit closer and louder if this is better.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So we had over 20,000 Pennsylvanians actually contribute to the plan. This was either through listening sessions, this was through direct engagement, people sending letters, emails, calls. We took all of that information, presented it to over 30 state agencies who are now directly involved in the implementation of the plan. These agencies were named in our plan, and we have been doing continual follow-up with them since June, since our budget cycle began. And then the content, so we have 5 high-level priorities, 36 strategic approaches, and 163 actionable tactics. What I like to remind people here is that these tactics are not all happening in year one. That would not be feasible for the Commonwealth. It wouldn't be feasible for our budget. So that's over the 10-year life cycle of the plan. This is a living document. We do expect these tactics to be changed, to be current with the times. Technology is a large factor in this. We want to be able to adapt to what's happening currently. We use the 8 domains of livability framework to center our discussions for the plan. So the plan is person-centered, community-focused, and evidence-based. And all of our conversations were really based upon these 8 domains of livability. So a lot of people will think of just the health services and community support side, but it is much broader than that. We had communication information, and we had transportation, housing. And this was a really big component of working with those other agencies, of working with our Department of Human Services, our Department of Health, but also our Department of Community and Economic Development. All of these really touch the lives of older adults everywhere. And we wanted to make sure that, just because this isn't somewhere we would normally have engagement, they are truly impacting older adults' lives. One example I usually like to bring up is the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Older adults make up a huge proportion of our volunteers at our state parks here in Pennsylvania. And it's not somewhere we would normally think of overlap between the Department of Aging and DCNR, but it's somewhere that older adults use every single day, that we can highlight and show the work that is going on across the Commonwealth to improve the lives for older adults.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Senator Housley here. I don't know if the slides are changing or if we're still just on the one slide, but we're still on the main slide here.
Thank you. And maybe I can ask Gabby if she can advance her slides. I was looking at my own handouts, so I wasn't watching the screen. And
my apologies. It's changing on my screen, so let me click through for you really fast. This was about the demographics. Can everybody see that now changing?
Yes.
yes, thank you.
Okay. Let's see.
We are on Pennsylvanians are aging. That's the slide that we are seeing.
Yeah, give me just one moment here. It's weird that it's not sharing correctly. I'm not quite sure why.
And now we're back to the first slide.
Okay. Well, that is very strange. Not sure why, but I will just click through this way instead. So this was aging our way by the numbers where I talked about the background, our stakeholder engagement process. And this is where I was getting to now is the 5 high-level priorities and kind of what they mean. Can everybody see that slide? It says
Yes, thank you very much.
great. Okay. So as you can see, some definitely have more partner agencies than others, which has really guided our implementation process of what's feasible and what's not. So as you can see, Aging in Community has 25 partner agencies. This touches almost every single agency across the Commonwealth, and has really guided how we've moved forward with this plan. Our organizational structure. So this is where I really wanted to talk today about how implementation is going in Pennsylvania, what we have done so far, and what we plan to do. And then I'll take some questions. So a little bit of background. For our budget process, we requested almost $12 million. We were budgeted just under 3 million, 2.95 million. So this really made us pivot, rethink about where we can go this year, what we can do versus can't do, what we were hoping to do. So we did have a little slight budget that we were not expecting, but we restarted. We said, okay, what can we do? Can we look for other funding sources? And this is the organizational structure that really came out of those conversations specifically. So of course, we do have our governor's office at the top. This is first and foremost a governor's authorized plan. This was sanctioned by an executive order that the governor signed in May of 2023. And then the plan was developed and signed in May of 2024. So just about a 1-year turnaround. Under the governor's office, we have, of course, the Secretary of Aging here at the department. This is a cabinet level position in Pennsylvania, and then other cabinet secretaries and independent agencies. Under the Secretary of Aging, we have the Long-Term Care Council. They were identified as the steering committee for this plan in the executive order and are going to continue as a governance body for the plan, highlighting priorities, highlighting which tactics should be prioritized for the following years. Also under the Secretary of Aging, we have the plan lead and plan support team. That is made up of myself and 2 of my colleagues here at the department who were not able to join today, but it is a pretty small team for a robust plan. So we are really reliant on the other people here at the Department of Aging, our policy director, and external staff in the Commonwealth-wide agencies to really be invested in this plan. Under the other cabinet secretaries and independent agency leaders, we do have our interagency work group members. This is made up primarily of state staff at other agencies, but we also here like to bring in people from the Long-Term Care Council, external stakeholder group. We have a Pennsylvania Council on Aging, which is more of an advisory body, but they are instrumental in these interagency work groups and really moving tactics along. And I can talk a little bit about that with our implementation process. So we have our governance at the top, and with a really direct line of communication with the plan management team. I like to say that the plan management team are really the facilitators of discussion. So we are communicating with all aspects of the implementation process, with the governance team, with evaluation, with tactic execution, and we relay those messages where they need to go. So we are really trying to facilitate these conversations to move forward with tactics. So where we are right now is we have presented a similar but more extensive presentation to all of the policy directors across the Commonwealth, and have actually started to do individual meetings with these agencies to say, what can you do for year one? What were you funded for year one? Next steps, and then is this something that would be possible for year two and would need a budget priority for year two? So those are the conversations that are happening currently. It's been, trying to coordinate with 30 different agencies is a large undertaking. It is time consuming, but it's something that we're dedicated to and something that our governor's office is dedicated to. And I think this has been a really key component for us, is having this support, this guidance, this backing from our governor's office and other high-level cabinet secretaries in other agencies. Our Department of Human Services has been particularly a large voice for this plan. And with this kind of backing and support, we are able to go to other agencies and say, hey, we need your help to do this. And if if they're reluctant, or if there is a large time gap, we have these people that are really instrumental in making sure that this can move forward. We can go to our governor's policy office and say, hey, we need your help in talking to XYZ and making sure that we have a plan to move forward. So I believe that's kind of where we are now. And I would be happy to take any questions or concerns about the whole process overall, or about implementation, about budget specifically.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to task force members online first. Do you have any questions? Senator Housley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Szymanski, for that presentation. That was interesting, and good luck. But in your organizational structure there, how many of the people that you pulled into that org were already existing employees, and how many were pulled from different departments and just reorganizing?
Sure. So, well, thank you. And great job on the name. Not always an easy name to pronounce. So, asking about how many people are you saying with the Department of Aging, or kind of with the Commonwealth in general?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. What part of this whole structure were new people brought in?
Sure.
Yeah.
So we have actually pulled in new people, mostly in this interagency work group members and this long-term care council. So the long-term care council has they have fixed time periods in which they serve, either 3, 4, or 5 years they're on the council. And this year was actually a big turnover year. So we had 14 new people join in 1 year. So this is a really great effort in moving new ideas along and bringing in external voices. And then in the interagency work group members, this is something that's still ongoing, but I will say we have heavily relied upon our primary contacts that were in the development of the plan to identify new points of contact at the different departments. So what happened during the development is we really relied on our policy directors across the Commonwealth to say, this is what we can do versus what we can't do. And now it's actually working with those program area specific individuals at DCD, at DCNR, and working with people that we haven't actually met before and getting them up to speed on the plan. And then under them are these tactic leaders who are often external people from the Commonwealth, but are part of like big stakeholder groups. And these are often people who might have made comments and might have supported the plan development, but are now playing a really crucial role in implementation.
Thank you.
And may I ask, I think one of the questions that Senator Housley was asking is, did you feel a need to add additional FTEs as you were doing this work in the agencies? And correct me, Senator Housley, if I have that question incorrect.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that acronym, FTEs.
Oh, I'm sorry, full-time equivalent employees of the state.
Sure, thank you. So, no, this is something that is, we've not needed to add new employees. This is something that's being embedded in the work that is already currently going on. There is no hiring of new positions to specifically support this plan. We anticipate that might be something that's needed down the road. We might try to hire one specific person here at the Department of Aging that will be only working on Aging Our Way PA. But at the moment, it is not something that is feasible in the budget, and it's not something that's necessarily needed yet. But in 2-3 years, we do anticipate that could be a need.
Thank you for that. Senator Housley, did you have follow-up questions?
Yes, thank you again, Madam Chair. I should have printed out the whole thing. What did you say, Ms. Szymanski, was the overall cost of just this structure?
So this structure doesn't come with a specified cost. Our year one request to implement the tactics specifically was $11.73 million. That was really going to the program area side of Aging Our Way PA. This organizational structure uses the resources that were already in place. So this is the resources that we get in our cost to carry. So what we like to say is that this is not new work. This is just the work that we are doing shifting to new priorities. This is really being embedded in the work that the program area people are already doing. And it's the work that's changing. So out of that $11.73 million request, we were funded for $2.95 million specifically for our caregiver toolkit.
Madam Chair, Ms. Szymanski, it was caregiver toolkit, did you say?
Yes.
And what's in the caregiver toolkit again?
So this is something that's being currently developed, has not been completed yet, but this will be an online and hopefully printed resource for our informal and unpaid caregivers, those family caregivers, friends, families who are really caring for a loved one, but don't necessarily know where to turn for resources. So it'll be a guide for respite care, for people to say, I need help from home and community-based services. It's something that's in development right now with the Aging Our Way team here at the Department of Aging, and will hopefully be completed by September of next year, September 2025.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's interesting. I'd like to see a follow-up when you get that all going. That sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Housley. Anyone else online? Representative Zalesnikar.
I'm good, thank you.
My apologies. I thought your hand was up.
No, it's okay.
Dr. Gogler, did you have any questions or comments? Right, not seeing any at this time. Okay.
Madam Chair, I have one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Housley, yes.
Thank you so much. This just popped in. For Ms. Szymanski again, what is Pennsylvania's Department of Aging overall budget for your last fiscal year?
I do not have that number at the top of my head. I will say that 80% of our funding comes from our lottery fund. So Pennsylvania, unlike a lot of our states, our funding for the department is from the state. It is not from the Administration for Community Living. ACL dollars make up only 20% of our fiscal budget per year. So this is a really big shift and allows us to innovate and do some unique programming here in Pennsylvania because of our large lottery dollar funding structure.
Thank you.
Anything further?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Housley. To the table, Ms. Schneider, did you have questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Gabby, for the update. I remember when we heard the presentation earlier in this process, And thanks for reminding me about those lottery dollars because that was a pretty big deal when you told me that. I have a couple of questions. You talked about the ACL dollars and they only make up 20% of your budget, but I'm wondering, how are those administered? Through what department within the aging? How are the Medicaid dollars administered? And how are the Older Americans Act dollars administered?
I don't want to speak out of turn, but primarily our Medicaid dollars are going to our Department of Human Services. Almost all Medicaid programming is run through the Department of Human Services, whereas almost all of our home and community-based services, our Older Americans Act programming, is run through the Department of Aging. So all Title III funding flows through the Department of Aging and our Finance Bureau here to our program staff. And then to the AAAs eventually, of course. Another unique part of Pennsylvania is that we do have 52 area agencies on aging. So 67 counties and 52 AAAs.
Ms. Schneider.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Another question. You talked about the current conversations that have been taking place to get a handle on year one accomplishments. Could you give us a couple of examples of things that have been brought out as examples of the way things are working?
Sure, absolutely. So I actually had a call earlier this month with our Department of Human Services, and I have another one today. So one of the primary areas that we heard comments was on housing and the need for both affordable and accessible housing. And as part of the plan, the Department of Human Services has extended our 1115 waiver, which provides more opportunities for both affordable and accessible housing for lower income older adults, specifically across the state. So these are the conversations that are continuously happening and saying, okay, what work is being done that is tied to the plan and how can we elevate that to move this forward? And so I think a really great part of Aging Our Way is I don't want to say forcing, but the collaboration that is happening between departments that has been particularly siloed in the past. There are these conversations happening that did not happen before, so we can elevate the work of each other and really bring it to the attention of the public and say, this is available now, and we have your support and we have the support of the governor's office. So that's just one example. The Department of Community and Economic Development. As part of Aging Our Way PA, we heard a lot about the inaccessibility of just sidewalks and Main Street in Pennsylvania. And they have a very large push to make Main Streets more accessible, more well lit, to have benches. And this is something that is directly part of Aging Our Way PA and something that we like to highlight. Making accessibility for an older adult, making the curb cuts more accessible for older adults is good for everybody. It's universal accessibility. It's good for the mother pushing a stroller down the street by herself. So this is something that we like to highlight through our Department of Community and Economic Development. That is a true partnership with the Department of Aging here and Aging Our Way PA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this group that that we're talking about with the current group, how often do you get a chance to sit down with them and talk about the progress you're being made, hear about benchmarks and any kinds of what might be working, what may not be working? How frequent is your interaction?
Sure. So this is really dependent on how robust their part of Aging Our Way is. I will say our health hub, so the Department of Health, the Department of Human Services, Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs, we meet with them. I mean, I am constantly talking with them, either over email, in meetings, face to face. So that I would say is, probably bi-weekly. I'm talking to them constantly. But some of our other programming that may not be as robust is more about monthly. And then we have quarterly updates with the entire organizational structure. So these are meetings that will potentially have, 80, 90, 100 plus members of this organizational structure. And so those are a little bit harder to coordinate, but we are hoping to do on a quarterly basis. We just did our first one in September. So for the next quarter, we are hoping to do another one to give an update on where we are and where the other departments are as well.
Ms. Schneider.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one more question, Gabby. Thinking about the number of people that you would be convening, are your members able to send delegates to keep the flow of information and the work continuing?
Yes, absolutely. So this is not, because this is not in statute or legislated, we can have designees, we can have other representatives come for their departments as long as they are able to report back to their department on what the progress has been, and they can tell us what the progress has been. So it's a pretty open structure. It's not, there's no specific, we don't even have to have designees. It can just be the representative of that agency at that time.
Thank you very much. And I do want to thank you also for a comment that you made earlier regarding the walkability of main streets. I'm thinking back many years ago in my aging career when I would be talking to public local officials about curb cuts and not being friendly to our elderly community. I think the tide turned when I was able to say, well, if it works for a stroller, then it will work for a walker. So thank you very much for bringing that point out because I don't think it has changed. Appreciate your time today. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members? Okay, I just have a few things that I would like to ask you about. So as you're thinking about this open structure, it would be my hope in anything that we would do in Minnesota that aging would be considered and public health would be considered across the lifespan in all of our public policies. So whether we're doing transportation, housing, medical services, employment, is that something that you are charging with your agency leads as well?
Yes. So this is not necessarily like a written goal of the plan, but we think that is something that will come out of the plan, right? So if we are embedding the values of Aging Our Way PA into these other agencies, this is something that will become a byproduct that will come out of these conversations. The more that we talk about older adults and the needs and the infrastructure for supporting older adults, the better we think these other agencies will be able to serve older adults, whether it be through housing or transportation. So these conversations have been really, really critical in moving this, in progressing this kind of movement along in really thinking about older adults as a specific population with specific needs. So yes, we think this is something that will come out of the plan because of all the collaboration that are happening across agencies.
And to that point, when I think about investments that need to be made, like you, I believe that there are already agency dollars and agency priorities that are important to both our younger Minnesotans and our older Minnesotans. And I think if I'm hearing you correctly, this would encourage the agencies to say, okay, this is no longer a back burner issue, but is to be considered part of the daily work as you go forward. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, absolutely. And this is somewhere that just by us being present and vocal has been really important. Lifting it up as a priority for everybody.
Okay, in Minnesota, we also have different councils, right? So we have our Council on Disability, we have our Latino Affairs, we have our African American Council, we have our Indigenous populations represented as well. Are you incorporating all of the various communities within the state of Pennsylvania in these conversations as well?
Yes. So here in PA, I think what they would be considered are commissions. And so these are governor appointed positions on these commissions. And they have been really crucial in moving this work along. I would specifically like to highlight our LGBTQ commission and our women's commission have been really, really critical in highlighting the importance of diverse voices and of, the intersectional voices of potentially being a woman, being an older adult, and potentially being Black. So this intersection has been a really key component in understanding the diverse voices that need to be included in the implementation of the plan.
And then as I think about building livable communities throughout the lifespan, right? To be accommodating throughout the lifespan, I'm always mindful of who pays and who benefits, right? So how are you balancing the needs of the residents of your state and the needs of your business community? And I see in Minnesota that when one benefits, the other benefits as well. But I'm wondering, how are you dealing with that in your state?
I would tend to say the same. When one benefits, we all benefit. This has been a particular conversation with our Department of Community and Economic Development, who are doing a lot of this on the ground partnership with small businesses and with local community partners. And getting their buy-in has been important. A lot of these small businesses and partnerships are led by older adults themselves. They are instrumental in their communities and building community. So I would say, like you, when one benefits, we all benefit. And this is something that we've just been relaying over and over and over again, just to make sure that, the message sinks in.
Right. And then I think I'll wrap up with this, and I'm going to thank you so much for your time. When I look at the amount of state space that Minnesota owns, and are we using that state space? I'm thinking like our community colleges and university systems that we have all across the state and incorporating them as community hubs. Are you looking into that in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, great question. This is something that came up a lot during the development. And like you said, our community colleges, our PASHE, Pennsylvania education system, and our universities. So something that we've noted here in Pennsylvania is that enrollment, like a lot of places, is down at our colleges and universities. But this means that there's a lot of unused housing space that could be converted for older adults. It's already ADA compliant. There is good connection to local community resources. So this is something we are actually working with PASHE, with the Department of Human Services, and our PHFA, our housing agency, to see if that we can convert these actual university and state-owned spaces into housing specifically for older adults. We run into some zoning issues, but it's conversations that are ongoing.
Okay, and then when you said that, I just thought of something else. So as we are doing our K-12 system with wraparound community services, are you incorporating your local school districts also in that community health space?
Yes, local school districts, local libraries, all of these public spaces are really important in our intergenerational programming. So we want to create more opportunities for multi-generational and intergenerational opportunities for older adults. They're a great source of wisdom and knowledge, and that we believe that communities can benefit from. So lifting them up as volunteers in the community, specifically in schools, is a focus of some of the tactics.
I'm so sorry. One statement you make leads me to another. So as you are thinking about our older population, they also have great needs to continue to work if they so desire. Are you considering hiring those older adults to help fill the gaps that you have in some of the other areas within your state? I'm thinking about the childcare. It's one thing to have volunteers. It's another for both to benefit economically as well.
Yes. Again, all of these are great points and a lot that came up in the development phases. So one of our tactics is specifically related to our Department of Labor and Industry and highlighting jobs specifically that might be targeted for older adults. Jobs that have flexible work schedules, jobs that are part-time, jobs that are more accessible for older adults. So kind of highlighting these in a specific way. Maybe they have a star, or maybe we haven't figured out the actual logistics yet. But online in our state, if you go to the jobspa.gov, making sure that there's a note there for older adults that might be, this is a great older adult specific job. So this is something we've thought a lot about. You will probably all know we have gaps in our direct care workforce. We have gaps in our labor industry in general, and older adults are a great way that we might be able to fill this gap if they want to continue to work and want to continue in their careers and in their jobs.
In Minnesota, I think of our older Minnesotans as a great brain trust that I don't really want to lose. There's a lot of knowledge there. And as we have more individuals over 65 than we have in, joining kindergarten, we have to think about how we make opportunities. So I thank you so much for that information. And I appreciate the ongoing dialogue that Pennsylvania has had with Minnesota as we are both trying to find our way in this process. So thank you very much for the update, and I'm sure that we will continue further dialogue as we move forward on our path. Thank you again for being present with us today.
Thank you.
Okay. So many things. Every time I hear one thing, my mind jumps to another. The next item on our agenda this morning, if I can find my chair agenda, it is to talk about the really, really high level task force draft proposal that is in your packet today. And so there's a document entitled Draft Outline for Cabinet on Aging Legislation that's in your packet. And this is a draft that I have worked with, that our team has worked with the revisor's office at a very, very high level. It is by no means a final document. It's just a way for us to begin this conversation about what the final recommendation would look like. So I want to take this document and kind of put it into layman's terms for the general public who might be listening. So as we're thinking about a Minnesota cabinet position on aging, we think that it would be good for it to be housed in management and budget. Management and budget is already the host of smaller offices, and they have resources that they can use to help this cabinet level position move forward. We also believe that by housing it in management and budget, it would eliminate some of the perceptions of bias from the agencies in which it is trying to coordinate. It would also allow clean lines of responsibility and authority. We would want this Minnesota Cabinet on Aging to have the power to convene, much like we just heard from Pennsylvania, to work across the agencies. It would be empowered by legislation or by governor. And we would need to establish an operating budget for the work and the individuals in this office. We are initially thinking of a staffing of 4 individuals, a director, associate director, public engagement, and project coordinator or analyst. The work to be done would begin with developing the state plan on aging, and they would be required to steward the plan and to ensure compliance with federal and state policies that are informed by the plan that is drafted. The important thing is that we want this agency or entity to bring together agencies, those silos of excellence, and the councils that we know exist in this state and are doing excellent work. And it is to bridge the administrative barriers to coordinate, collaborate, and to drive innovation for the dignity of aging across the lifespan in livable communities with social and economic opportunities. So when we think about what we just heard from Pennsylvania, they mentioned some areas such as the DNR. They were surprised by how many older Pennsylvanians were involved in that as volunteers. But we also need to think about the Department of Human Services, the Department of Health, Commerce, Deed, Children, Youth and Families, homelessness, transportation, higher education, addiction, and substance recovery. And the list goes on. They mentioned 30 agencies, and we would have the same in Minnesota, that type of work. But it would be aligning the pieces that we're doing and stitching together where we can and where we have needs, and to identify the opportunities for improvement. So using existing state resources where possible to enhance the lives of Minnesotans. So I mentioned the opportunity of maybe using state-owned properties that we have to serve Minnesotans in a different and maybe more enhanced way. We would want this cabinet level position to advance public policy and also potential investments that are grounded in public health in every piece of legislation, to advance public policy and potential investments for economic empowerment, to advance public policy and to build and sustain livable communities throughout our state and throughout the life cycle of all Minnesotans. We would also be thinking about moving the long-term care ombudsman out of DHS. Again, it's just to clarify for the public the lines that exist between the ombudsman and DHS, and then to look at our Board of Aging and to see if it would belong in this new office, and maybe potentially update the statutes that are quite old to accommodate the needs of the state that we have today. And so that's a very high level talking discussion of what we are thinking about as the task force. And I would be happy to entertain any kind of public question or comment regarding this. Members of the task force, do you have any comments? Dr. Gogler.
Yeah, thank you so much. I very much appreciate that, and hopefully this will help start setting the stage for, in the end, us delivering what we were asked to do, which is the final recommendation, which is great. This is more of a process-oriented comment, but one thing I am interested in doing, I thought Andrew did a good job. Again, I've reviewed this now, and one thing I thought Andrew did a good job in was summarizing the various recommendations from the many testifiers we have had over the course of the task force. And one thing I think that would be helpful, in addition to proposing this potential structure, is to also, whatever this entity or structure ends up being, depending on what we agree upon, is to focus on some of the recommended courses of action that have been provided by these many testifiers. And again, if any of you have read the report, you'll see in the tables, Andrew has put all the various recommendations in a very easy way to follow. I'm actually in the process. I've hired a research assistant at the University of Minnesota. She's going to be working on other projects with me. But one of the things I will have her do, if there's interest and value to the task force, is I'm going to have her go through all of the different recommendations provided to synthesize them. I'd like to see if there's some commonality of themes throughout the recommendations. And why I think this is important is as we move ahead to build upon the current work that's happening in the state and beyond to develop this integrated state plan, for example, that whatever entity is charged to do so should be focusing on what has been recommended and what has been coming through as these constant themes of need from the various experts that have testified. So that's just the comment I want to make. It's more of a process-oriented comment, but hopefully that is seen as potentially helpful here.
Thank you, Dr. Gogler. Any other questions online or at the dais? Representative Selesnikar.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate the presentation and the conversations today and for all of our task force. I think the cabinet level, to me, makes sense. I think it's also an opportunity to look at bridging, the past task force. The task force met in 2000 for the long-term care task force. Minnesota's had the 2030 plan where DHS and the Minnesota Board of Aging partnered together and put together a plan. And was a part of many of those discussions over the last, 30 years in healthcare. And I think that this cabinet level then will be able to take those pieces of studies and look at where are we at, where have we hit the mark, and where do we still need to either facilitate different communication or collaboration for the current needs today. Where were we accurate on our predictions for greater Minnesota and the suburbs of Minneapolis, St. Paul? And then where are the gaps still remaining? So we can take some of that historical task force study that's been done and a tremendous amount of effort across the state and continue moving it forward for where we're at today, and then looking out, for the next decades to come. So I think it makes sense from what I can see.
Thank you, Representative Lesnicar. Senator Housley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, I really do like, and I know you and I have talked previously about this draft outline and suggestions. And I think it's great to pull all this together, all those pieces that have been out there over the years, to have one central place where it can all be pulled together. I'm wondering, in this proposal, do we have any idea, again, what the cost will be, who will be, how many new FTEs we will need, where would these people be coming from? Is there an org chart, or is it just those, the executive director and deputy director and project director, and maybe a project coordinator? Is it just that we're the starting point? Is that what you're thinking, Madam Chair?
Thank you, Senator Housley, and I think it's a really great question. I've looked around at what we're doing in other areas where we have identified gaps and how we can better serve Minnesotans. And it seems to me that these smaller offices that are able to convene and really just coordinate and collaborate with the work that's being done and bringing to the fore the challenges that we have to make sure that those are being seen and elevated. I think the word Pennsylvania used was elevated. And in many of those offices, they work with very tight budgets. I've seen anywhere from $800,000 to $1.25 million. So I think this is something that the legislature will have to really sit down and discuss what it is that we think will work, and set a budget for that, and then to try to figure out, much like Pennsylvania, what will be the primary deliverables in that beginning phase, and then move on from there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really do think this is a great starting point. Instead of going full on everything, to really start small and pull all the pieces together and really look at them and see what's needed going forward. So I fully support this draft outline. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Housley. Ms. Schneider.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of clarifying questions, if you don't mind. Under the funding area, that would be item 7, coordination with other state agencies on federal funds available for programs. So we would be assuming then that federal funds, being Medicaid, Older Americans Act, they would stay with the current state agency, which is the Minnesota Department of Health.
That would be my understanding, yes. Okay,
thank you. And then on item number 8, transfer the Minnesota Board on Aging to the new cabinet level department. I want to remind us that the Minnesota Department of Aging is responsible for a state plan on aging. And it's a 3-year plan. And right now, at this current time, our plan for the years 2025 through 2028 have been submitted to the Administration for Community Living, otherwise known as ACL. And we are in the final stages, just 1 or 2 more small points, and then we will have final approval. So I wanted to bring that to your attention to remind you that a good deal of work has already been done by the Board on Aging on that state plan.
Thank you, Ms. Schneider, and this is something that I'm acutely aware of. In no way do we want to do anything that would disrupt our federal funds coming into the state. And I do want to recognize the work that DHS does in that preparation of the state plan with the Board of Aging. And I would want to make sure that that would continue to go forward, that work in collaboration. Ms. Schneider.
I also would you please just say again, I only took down a partial note. On transferring the Ombudsman for Long-Term Care out of DHS, it had to do with the public's understanding of how that program flows through, its accessibility. Could you say just a little more, please?
What I have discovered is that for the Ombudsman Office for individuals living with disabilities, they are separated from DHS, and that has allowed the public to understand that when they talk to the Ombudsman, that their concerns and their voices are the primary direction for the Ombudsman. And so when there is an ombudsman, which is housed and under the support services of an agency, for the public, it may not appear that the lines are clean. And all I'm trying to do here is and it's not me, but these are requests that have come forward from the public. It's just to try to let the public know that yes, their voices are heard. Yes, their voices are the priority. And yes, there are clear lines of authority, and that the Ombudsman is not under the direction of the department in which the individual may or may not have concerns.
Thank you. And then just one more comment that I'd like to make. I spent a couple of days last week meeting with our 7 area agencies on aging in the state and hearing what their plans are going forward for this year and into the future. And I will tell you that a good deal of thoughtful work has already gone into the work of these area agencies on aging in serving not only with services, but in the whole concept of the livable community, livable for a lifetime. And I especially like the fact that ACL, the Administration for Community Living, has a mantra right now that I think is going to be helpful. It's called Back to Basics. And I think from time to time, we all need to do that because we can get lost in our own acronyms, much less what they might actually mean. So when I saw and heard what the area agencies on aging were planning to do, I was very impressed because they're looking at two key areas. First of all, serving those who have the greatest economic need. And then secondly, those who have the greatest social need. So to me, that speaks of the service portion of aging in Minnesota. And it also speaks to me of the communities for a lifetime piece. And I think that those are 2 healthy ingredients that must be included in our work. So I'm pleased about it.
Thank you, Ms. Schneider. And I would like to elevate the work that our AAAs do. They do really great work and they know the needs of the local communities. And that's why I would refer people to the outline for the Cabinet on Aging legislation. In the duties, it very much talks about the importance of social participation and social inclusion, the outdoor spaces, and all of these access and barriers to health services, housing, transportation, and civic participation. So thank you for elevating that. And again, this cabinet level is not to replace the area agencies on aging, but to elevate their work and to help other agencies see the importance of the work that they're doing and see how we can better collaborate. So if transportation has a project planned, let's incorporate the needs that the area agencies on aging are seeing, right? So it is to make sure that we are looking at things holistically and to elevate aging in all of our public policy and to elevate public health through the lifespan. Any further comments from the task force? Dr. Gogler?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your insightful comments here today. You know, the one final point I'll make, and this is kind of looping back to the very beginning, it might have been the very first thing I said when I was on this task force, is I think whatever we put in the report and what has been too often missing is an emphasis on, regardless of the work that takes place in this new entity, that there will be a plan put in place to implement or to track implementation of recommendations to ensure its success. It's very easy to talk about all the work that's happening, and we're doing this meeting and that meeting and this initiative and that initiative. But if we don't have more detailed information, not only for ourselves, but for the public and Minnesotans, in terms of these are the recommendations made, and this is how far we've gotten into implementing them, and ideally, this is how well they've worked. If we don't offer that information, we're just going to fall into the trap of so many others of these reports, where a paper is generated, recommendations are listed, and then we have no idea, was anything actually accomplished and did it actually achieve what was it intended to accomplish? So that implementation piece is what I think would set us apart. We'll continue to ensure that we in Minnesota are innovative in aging services. And again, Minnesota is known as an innovator in aging services. I sometimes it's hard to tell when listening to some of the testimony and other things in this task force, but make no mistake, it is. And by putting in a strong implementation approach, and whether it's a dashboard or whatnot that's publicly available, publicly accessible, and can be understood, that will allow us to maintain that position.
And Dr. Gogler, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the data, the metrics and the accountability will be an important part of this work. And in meeting with like MDH, public health has the ability to track a great deal of the work that's being done. This is what public health is all about. And so I would be very hopeful that in this collaborative nature, that either public health or the University of Minnesota, these state entities would be able to collect the data, be able to analyze the work that's being done, and to make sure that we are receiving a return on the investment and that we are improving the livability of Minnesota for all Minnesotans. So I agree completely. We have to make sure that that work is being measured. Was there any follow-up, Dr. Gogler?
No, yeah, I think that's great. I think we are on the same wavelength in that regard. And, you know, to some of the questions related to efficiency and cost and such, I would make a very strong argument. If you don't have this strong framework in place on accountability, tracking metrics, you do fall into the trap of not understanding is what we're doing actually cost beneficial in the end. So, yeah, that would be just my final comment. But thank you, Chair.
And I will say that not all of the things that we are going to do will be inexpensive. You know, investments are important, and we have to make sure that the structure for people to live and have a valuable life is there. But that is a conversation for another day and potentially a different task force. Any other comments? Ms. Schneider?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope you can still hear me. Got a little equipment malfunction. Thank you. I just want to go back to what Dr. Gogler was saying about data, about trending, about evaluating progress and adding the money piece to that. One thing that I think it's important for us to bear in mind when we think about state and federal funds and dollars for senior programs, the Older Americans Act dollars are really the better value for Minnesotans. They're the softer services. We've talked about it before. They can provide it upstream rather than downstream when there's a catastrophe. And so I'm hoping that we're going to be able to, if we can we can stay in the mode of wanting to evaluate our programs for what they actually are accomplishing and how much did that cost us as taxpayers in Minnesota, I believe that we will improve the credibility of the whole aging package in the state of Minnesota. I'm anxious to do that. A couple of weeks ago, some of us on the Board on Aging had an opportunity to tour a grantee from one of the Minnesota Live Well at Home projects, a senior building that was in need of refurbishing. And we got to ride on the elevator that now works. And we got to tour a couple of apartments of residents. And then we got to have a senior resident roundtable after we'd done our tour, and hearing from those individuals who are now able to remain in their apartments, not have to move, have built up a social structure, have many, many good things going for them. Those are the kinds of hands-on things that I believe it's important for us to visit every once in a while, so the average Minnesotan can say, yes, this is working.
Thank you. And I totally agree that Minnesotans need to know that their state cares about them and that we're willing to invest in them. I would just like to bring the public's attention to this fact. The Minnesota public health system is rather expansive. We have 51 community health boards, 74 health departments in our 87 counties. There are 11 sovereign nations and 4 Dakota communities and 11 Ojibwe Anishinaabe reservations. And there are 8 district offices. And it is really important that we have collaboration between the local, state, and tribal communities and government entities as we move forward with this work. So I just want to make sure that that's out there as well. Are there any comments from the public on this proposal? Okay, I see none at this time, but I'll expect probably there will be some as we move forward. The next item on our agenda, then we'll move away from the task force draft proposal, and we will go to public testimony on recommendations proposed to the task force. And we have the Minnesota Commission of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing.
Test, test. Test.
I have no idea. I thought the microphone. So to the public, I understand our AV system is totally not working as we desire today. So thank you for your patience. Ms. Lane, when you're ready, if you'll just begin your testimony, please.
Testing, testing. Testing. All right. Well, good morning. My name is Alicia Lane, and I am the Government Relations Director for the Minnesota Commission of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing. Thank you for the opportunity again to speak with you all. I do want to, before I get going, mention that our Executive Director, Dr. Darlene Zangara, was planning to be here today, and due to a death in the family, isn't able to make it. So she sends her regards. But she was involved in this letter, and we worked together to create it. I also want to mention, I really appreciate the Pennsylvania Department of Aging's emphasis on if something benefits one, it benefits all. That pretty much summarizes my letter here today. So we, the commission, presented to you all on this task force in December of 2023. And I have some recommendations and resources on caregiving, healthcare, technology, and housing. So we really appreciate including those in your draft. Now, this letter today was a little bit tougher to write because this is trying to address a much bigger and more nebulous issue. But I thought I would try. Those are ideas that we would like, there are ideas that we would like to see ingrained into everything age-related here in the state of Minnesota. And there are three big ideas that I want to emphasize today. The first one is I recommend to assume that communication access needs will always be present and to be intentional in the planning of them. There are many with hearing loss, especially those who are experiencing age-related hearing loss that don't see themselves as disabled, and they may or may not even know that we may or may not even know that they are present. So now in this letter, I use some examples specifically from this task force, not at all because I'm trying to criticize anything that this task force has done, but you all are an exceptional group of people. And the fact that these things still exist and happen shows how pervasive this mindset is. So think about what, if these things are happening here, what it looks like in other spaces. So the first example has to do with captions. Here in this room, we see a beautiful example of captions. On the video at the bottom, we see the automatic speech recognition or ASR captions. Everyone in the audience can easily access that. In the other rooms that this meeting has taken place in, that it's not been the case. And in those cases, I've witnessed people quietly trying to awkwardly angling their body in a way or a position so that they can see them, or standing for an uncomfortable amount of time potentially so that they have access to be able to see the captions. And they do that rather than asking for better access. Because of the evolving identity journey of aging, we encourage you to view communication access with a broader lens. One that includes and extends beyond the regular traditional disability umbrella. So that was the first one. The second one is to encourage, or to, destigmatize communication access needs. This means to recognize that anytime someone has to request something, they're putting themselves at risk for experiencing stigma. So using the TV example again. So if you're planning to put the TV in a place where the audience can, everyone in the audience can access it, there's no need to make a request so that they can move their body so that they can see it. And also be aware of how communication access needs potentially interact or even conflict with other needs. Again, using the example from the task force meeting. We witnessed a person who moved their body trying to come up to the table to use the microphone. And I want to commend the chair, by the way, always doing such an incredible job encouraging everyone to use the mic in a way that benefits everyone, right? Not only the folks on the live stream, but also the folks using hearing aids or any kind of assistive hearing technology or devices. It just makes the quality of those ASR captions much better. So the use of the mic has been incredible. So I really want to commend you on that. But back to the example, when I had seen the situation of a person in a wheelchair trying to move, or with a mobility challenge, and I saw the person kind of hesitate to, okay, am I going to choose communication access, or am I going to put my body at risk of injury trying to reach this microphone? And that's a hard decision. That's a struggle. So if we're planning to, having a portable mic, of course, one that works. That does happen quite often. This is something that we experience lots of places. But that situation could have been avoided, having a working portable mic ready to provide to a person for communication access. So just overseeing this big picture. I also want to put out there another potential idea as a starting point to reframe. And I'm so sorry, before I say that, I do want to mention again that this is not just happening here, right? This is happening everywhere. I see this, we get reports all the time of people saying that assisted living facilities, for people taking enrichment classes at those assisted living facilities, not using a mic, not having a mic ready until someone asks for it. Well, of course, residents aren't always comfortable asking, and they're just used to struggling and trying to make their way through it without full communication access. So now I want to put out the idea, a potential starting point for reframing the communication access needs on a broader scale. So trying to look at the National Culture and Linguistics Appropriate Services, CLAS standards. So that's from the Department of Health and Human Services. Those standards focus specifically on healthcare services. However, foundationally, those policies can and should apply to any field that provides services, not just healthcare. So the last recommendation is to promote representation at every level for deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing folks throughout the age-related infrastructure. Those folks are the most sensitive guides in terms of communication access needs. And they have a special impact on folks that are not yet ready to advocate for their communication needs. So you can do this by partnering and identifying and recruiting those types of representation by partnering, for example, with us, the commission, or our sister agency, the State Services Division for Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing. So again, I really, really appreciate the opportunity to contribute to this important discussion on our vision for Minnesota, where all of us can thrive as we age. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lane. It's always, you are always so human in your presentation, and to kindly allow those of us with all abilities to see and hear the needs of others. And of our neighbors, of our friends, and our community at large. So I want to thank you for that work that you do. You've educated me in so many ways. So I just want to make sure that I have all 3 points really well understood. So assume communication access, understanding that there may be individuals who are not yet ready to identify that they have hearing loss, destigmatize communication access, making sure that no matter what space we're in, we are anticipating the needs and not making people come to us asking to have their needs met. And then to reframe this access on a broader scale, and to make sure that in every public space, there is dignity for all who are participating in the meeting and in the discussion.
Yes, and representation.
And
that third
representation.
piece. Yes, representation. The class standards talk about representation as well. So a lot of what I said is embedded in those class standards, if you look at those, and that may be a useful framework for your group from this recommendation.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being with us and for sharing your testimony with the task force today.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Are there any other individuals who wish to testify at this time? Okay, seeing none. We will move on to general discussion. And I think, Ms. Schneider, did you have comments that you wanted to make about your alignment document that we briefly discussed last meeting?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am pleased that we have been able in the task force and through the education we've received from so many who have testified. And I also appreciated what Dr. Gaugler had said about the first draft of the final report, and the way that Andrew George has been able to give us a good snapshot of who has testified and what they've brought to the table. And I believe we could possibly take Dr. Gaugler up on his suggestion for revisiting that to make sure that we are capturing all the areas of alignment. I also have appreciated the respect for the work of the Minnesota Board on Aging and its Area Agency on Aging partners, as it was expressed again today by Chair Cleavorn. And I am assured, and I believe we all can be assured, that there's no intent on this task force to blow up Medicaid. I do continue to have concerns about the administration of the state and federal Medicaid and Older Americans Act covered funds. We have addressed it somewhat today, and I asked, I think, some pointed questions about that. But I bring to your attention the concerns that I have partly are not only demographics, but they are cost of care. When you think about annual Medicaid payments for Minnesota elders that are projected to grow 71% from 2023 to 2035, that's due, of course, to the rising costs of care and the increased utilization as populations age, which is one of the reasons that the Minnesota Board on Aging keeps on working with our Area Agency on Aging through the Older Americans Act dollars to fund those softer services that are a better value and that in some cases can avoid altogether or at least delay the major catastrophe that can happen. But I am somewhat, I'm feeling more confident that that is going to remain with the Minnesota Department of Human Services. The area that I'm still not presently aligned with, and I think we're going to need to do some more work in it. I think the co-location may well resolve itself as we move forward with the task force recommendations and the things that we've heard today. I still think there is need for a good, thorough discussion on external collaborators and how they will be fitted in to whatever new structure we come up with. I can think of, for example, Age Friendly. And even when I was looking at the Pennsylvania, they refer to the domains similar to what Age Friendly Minnesota is presently working on. So we want to keep a close eye on what exactly do we mean by external collaborators? What do they bring to the table? How are things being funded, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to do some additional work on that topic. Beyond that, my question, Chair Cleavorn, would be next steps. Where do we go from here? How do we hone this in? And what are you thinking in terms of some additional drafts, et cetera, a November meeting, et cetera, et cetera?
Thank you very much, Ms. Schneider. And in looking at everyone's calendars, and I appreciate the participation of the public in this conversation. You have spent a great deal of time with us, both in person and in your emails and your comments and the discussion that you have provided to us through the portal. We are still looking for that public comment and discussion for our November meeting. The very high level plan that we have laid out today is there for you to tell us what you think. Is it enough? Is it too much? Do you have concerns? What are you thinking? And that will inform our meeting in November. And then we would like to come back in December for another meeting where we will have taken all of those comments that you have provided to us through November and put out that final proposal that will then go to the legislature as it is due in January, with the legislature beginning. I would like to have an opportunity to meet with anyone who needs to have a private conversation. If you don't want to speak in public, I want to make that available to you, and I would ask for you to reach out to Mr. George to see what we can schedule. This is really important work, and it's a very heavy lift. Minnesotans are asking for a bold plan. They're looking to make sure that older Minnesotans and Minnesotans living in the middle space are also provided for and cared for as they go through their golden years. But the work that we're looking at is about Minnesota communities being vibrant through the lifespan for all Minnesotans to grow and thrive wherever they are, and to use the existing resources that we have. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, but we do need to make sure that the path is rolling smoothly for all Minnesotans and that they know how to get services when they need them, where they can work when they want to work, and how do we keep everyone feeling that they're important, and making sure that we understand the investments that the legislature needs to bring forward so that people can have economic development in their community, so that they can have an opportunity to provide for themselves and their families, and that they have a quality and dignified life. We want this to be Minnesota-centered, Minnesotans, people at the front and center of the work that we do. So I need comments from you, and I ask for that. Senator Mann, do you have any comments? I love putting her on the spot.
Thank you, Representative Igor. Madam Chair. No, I completely agree with you. I think the way we did it was actually my preferred way of kind of having this high level overview today so that we have the next several weeks to really look at it, think about it, and then come back to the table and have a really robust discussion about it. Because this work is based on what the community needs and what the community is telling us that they want. And that's why too, I was in jest, we were having this conversation a couple weeks ago where Representative Cleavorn said, "You don't say much during these conversations." And I said, "I'm not here to talk. I'm here to listen." That's my goal, to take in what people are saying so that we can come up with a really robust plan that meets the needs of Minnesotans. And so I hope that everyone will take a time to look at this and then come back to the table so we can really talk about it.
Any other comments from the task force? Senator Housley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to go off of what Senator Mann said, I think we have done a really good job of listening to all of the different stakeholders and advocacy groups. And I think this will be a continuation of doing that with this outline for the Cabinet on Aging legislation, and to start small and then just to continue to see where we can focus in and what the needs are and continue to listen to the members of our community. So I think it's a great start. So thank you.
Well, our room has gotten very quiet. There are no more comments from the task force. Last call from anyone from the public wishing to say anything today? I see none. Please, I invite you to a robust conversation in November. Please check the website for the room assignment for our next meeting. And with that, our work today is concluded. We are adjourned.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.